On this Wednesday night, the Russian president's plan to ramp up his war in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin's latest threat.
This is not a bluff.
The response from Ukraine and the West. Public inquests ordered into the Saskatchewan stabbing rampage, when families of victims could get some answers. Travel mandates departing. What's waiting in the wings for ArriveCAN and vaccine requirements? And meet the coupon nanny.
We saved $200.71.
The connoisseur coaching Canadians on how to cut rising food costs.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Nitu Garcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. There has been a dangerous escalation in the war on Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered 300,000 reservists to be mobilized to fight. In his first TV address since the invasion began, Putin also strongly implied he's prepared to use nuclear weapons.
Those who try to blackmail us with nuclear weapons should know that the prevailing winds can also blow in their direction.
Putin's address comes as world leaders speak at the United Nations in New York. Appearing via recorded video, this is some of what Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had to say.
Ukraine wants peace. Europe wants peace. The world wants peace. And we have seen who is the only one who wants war.
It is a risky political move for Putin, but one that sends a clear message to both the Russian people and the West. U.S. President Biden says the world must be clear, firm, and unwavering in its resolve against Russian aggression in Ukraine. In our top story tonight, Redmond Shannon takes a look at what this major move could mean for the war.
Russians protesting against the mobilization of 300,000 reservists for the war in Ukraine. The recruits would add to the almost 200,000 troops initially deployed to the invasion. It comes just hours after President Vladimir Putin's U-turn on his earlier pledge not to mobilize. This, his first national TV address of this type since the February invasion. Putin also said he will support this month's so-called referendums on joining Russia, taking place in 4 Ukrainian regions. Russian-installed authorities will hold the votes in the 2 self-declared Donbas republics, Donetsk and Luhansk, and in the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions, although Russia does not hold full control over any of them. The referendums are being widely condemned internationally as shams. If Russia does annex new land, the Kremlin would crucially regard it as Russian soil.
If the territorial integrity of our country is threatened, we will without question use all the means at our disposal to protect Russia and our people. This is not a bluff.
All means would, of course, include nuclear weapons.
He is lying like always. He is bluffing.
Ukrainian MP Oleksiy Goncharenko believes Putin's plan is a sign of desperation. He's urging the West not to blink in its support of Ukraine.
The more Ukraine will receive weaponry today, the quicker everything will finish.
But some Ukrainian analysts fear the nuclear threat should be taken seriously, given that Russia is on the back foot and Ukraine is unwilling to compromise on its borders.
Putin specifically stated that he does not believe there is any possibility of peaceful deal, and the same was stated by Zelensky multiple times.
Whatever happens next, the growing spectre of a nuclear threat is undoubtedly an inflection point in this brutal conflict. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Abigail Bimman is in New York watching what the UN General Assembly is doing as the situation between Russia and Ukraine intensifies. Abigail, condemnation is one thing, but will the UN take further action?
Nitu, Ukraine tops the agenda as world leaders meet here. Both the U.S. and Ukrainian presidents address the General Assembly Wednesday. And while many, including Canada, condemn Russia's actions, how far the West is prepared to go is unclear.
Russia has shamelessly violated the core tenets of the United Nations Charter.
U.S. President Joe Biden condemns Russia's invasion in clear terms.
A brutal, needless war. A war chosen by one man.
Calling for support from member states. The timing of Putin's escalated nuclear threat during the UN's General Assembly is not lost on anyone.
A nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought.
We are facing an unprecedented situation where one of the founding members of the United Nations, member of the Permanent Security Council, is violating the most basic tenets of what the UN stands for.
Canada is focused on Ukraine here, too.
We need support. We want to stay part of the free world.
A meeting with the president of Moldova, which borders Ukraine and is threatened by Russia, one of several on the prime minister's agenda.
He is, first of all, having to move towards at least a partial conscription in Russia, which is a step closer to admitting what he has not wanted to admit to Russians, that this is a war that he has launched unjustifiably against a neighbor, is an example of things not going to his plan.
While Canada sends aid and continues to insist we stand by Ukraine, how far that help will go as the war drags on and the aid calls increase is not clear, neither for our country nor allies.
Punishment for tortures and humiliations of women and men. Punishment for the catastrophic turbulence that Russia provoked with its illegal war.
We could be at a turning point. They are winning. And now really is the time to double down on our support for them.
Biden also spoke out against Security Council members using veto powers, as Russia has done. The U.S. is calling for an expansion to Security Council seats. Canada hasn't had a spot in more than 20 years and lost in its last 2 bids. Neetu?
Abigail Bimman in New York. Thanks, Abigail. Saskatchewan's chief coroner has announced there will be a public inquest into the horrific mass stabbings that took place earlier this month in James Smith Cree Nation and the nearby community of Weldon. But the families of the 10 victims will have to wait a year before they learn more about what happened and why.
With the suspect deceased, there will not be a public criminal trial. Without a public hearing of the facts, it will leave many questions unanswered from the families involved and the public pertaining to the circumstances leading to the deaths.
The death of suspect Damian Sanderson will be considered as part of the public inquest. A separate inquest will be held to examine the in-custody death of the other suspect, Miles Sanderson. Both inquests will take place next year after the police investigation is finished. And as Heather Yourex-West explains, they will be heard by juries comprised entirely of Indigenous people.
For the past 2.5 weeks, the people of the James Smith Cree Nation have been doing their best to grieve and heal.
We're having daily sweats, elders, medicine men that are here, traditional healers, therapists.
Their collective trauma, one of the largest mass killings in Canadian history. Most of the dead, mothers, brothers, a Canadian veteran, have now been laid to rest. But so many questions around the horrific events remain.
Today, I am announcing that an inquest will be held for the 11 deaths that occurred on the James Smith Cree Nation and in Weldon on September 4, 2022.
A separate inquest will be held for the death of Miles Sanderson, standard practice for anyone who dies while in police custody. Sanderson was arrested several days after the killings following a prairie-wide manhunt. His cause of death has still not been made public, though the coroner revealed Tuesday it was not caused by blunt force trauma.
I would like to remind the families and the public that an inquest is not designed to find fault.
The chief coroner says the inquest will serve the same purpose as Nova Scotia's mass casualty inquiry. A jury will hear facts and make recommendations, though in this case each member of the 6-person jury will be Indigenous, and the inquests will be held as close to the James Smith Cree Nation as possible. Mark Arcand lost his sister and her son. He says news of the inquests brought mixed emotions.
Maybe some of my family have to testify and kind of relive this, but at the same time, it'll probably give us some answers as to what happened at the best that they can.
Nothing will bring back the ones who have been lost, but answers could help those grieving move on. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
There is a lot of buzz today about changes coming to Canada's COVID-19 border mandates. Global News has learned the federal government is preparing to drop vaccine requirements for arriving travelers, and the controversial ArriveCAN app is set to become optional. The government is expected to make these changes by the end of the month, but Ottawa is still clearly not ready to divulge its plans.
How can I say something that hasn't happened yet? Like, you're asking me to make an announcement about a decision that has not been taken. So it's not secrecy.
Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson is joining us now. So Mercedes, what do we know about these changes?
Well, Neetu, we know they're expected to kick in on September 30th, although none of them are final yet. And that's because Cabinet hasn't met. That's happening tomorrow. And that's when Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is expected to sign off on the following changes. Number one, that vaccination requirement for arriving travelers is going to go away. And with it, the ArriveCAN app will go away in terms of being mandatory. It'll still be optional, but you won't have to fill it out to get across the border. What is staying, though, is masking policy. So you will still have to wear your mask while you are flying or on a train in Canada. This has been a huge issue, the vaccinations and the ArriveCAN app, from a political liability perspective for this government. There's not a lot of political issues that really reach out and touch people and affect them directly, but these were two. It was affecting people in border towns and tourism areas who are reliant on tourists coming here, some of whom weren't vaccinated or couldn't figure out the app. There was more than 10,000 people accidentally, wrongly quarantined as a result of the glitch in the app. So with the snowbird season just ahead, Neetu, this was potentially becoming an even bigger issue for the government, and they wanted to get rid of it as one of the last countries actually to do so.
And Mercedes, as we wait to hear what the finalized plan will be, what can Canadians expect next?
So the next big debate might be masking policy, and we heard about this from WestJet today. WestJet put out a statement saying that mask non-compliance and enforcement on our aircraft continues to be a source of disruption for our people and guests, and this transition is critical to align with other major nations. So they want the government to drop that masking policy, but there's no sign of that on the horizon at this point, Neetu. We expect the other changes to become signed off on tomorrow by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa. Mercedes, thanks so much. Another legal hurdle for Donald Trump. Coming up, who's suing the former U.S. president and why? Plus, the intensifying fury of Hurricane Fiona. Fiona has now strengthened to a Category 4 hurricane. The huge storm already pounded parts of the Caribbean, killing at least 5 people and wiping out critical infrastructure. An estimated 80% of Puerto Rico is without power and running water. Fiona is bearing down on Bermuda before it slams the Atlantic coast. Environment Canada says the storm is expected to transition to a post-tropical storm Friday night as it approaches Nova Scotia. And residents are being warned to prepare for high winds and up to 200 millimeters of rain. Former U.S. President Donald Trump is now facing another legal storm. New York's Attorney General is suing Trump, his children, and senior executives of the Trump Organization for fraud. The civil suit alleges they purposely inflated the value of assets to secure more favorable loans. Reggie Cicchini reports.
His name is synonymous with wealth and power, but Donald Trump now risks losing both.
No one is above the law.
After a hard-fought battle to obtain information, New York's Attorney General Letitia James filed a civil lawsuit against Trump, 3 of his children, and key executives from the family company, accusing them of falsely inflating assets by billions of dollars.
Claiming you have money that you do not have does not amount to the art of the deal. It's the art of the steal.
The suit seeks $250 million in penalties and could prevent the Trumps from conducting business in New York.
We show that they violated several state criminal laws.
Millions of pages of documents were reviewed and dozens of witnesses gave interviews, including Donald Trump, who invoked his Fifth Amendment right more than 400 times.
Everything was done with the knowledge and at the direction of Mr. Trump.
It was that 2019 testimony from Michael Cohen, a former ally, that kickstarted this investigation after he exposed how Trump operated his company.
He is a con man, and he is a cheat.
Trump's team chalks this up to a political witch hunt. The Attorney General, a Democrat, is up for re-election in November, and this kind of announcement does break with norms.
The informal tradition is you don't do that sort of thing during the height of an election season.
Now, while this is a civil action, James also made criminal referrals to the Southern District of New York and the IRS, which could result in new federal investigations, just as Trump is expected to announce a new presidential campaign. Reggie Cicchini, Global News, Washington.
Protests and reaction to the death of an Iranian woman in custody are growing inside the country and around the world. Women in the capital, Tehran, are burning their headscarves in an act of defiance against the country's dress code. Internationally, protests and condemnation against the actions of morality police were seen in Istanbul, Berlin, Beirut, the U.S., and Canada, with the United Nations calling for an impartial investigation into Mahsa Amini's death. Ahead, police in Ontario honor a fallen officer after he was gunned down in senseless violence. Thousands gathered in Toronto today for the funeral of Constable Andrew Hong. He was one of 3 victims who died in a shooting spree that involved police from across southern Ontario. Mike Drolet reports on the emotional service and tributes that flowed in from his families at work and at home.
As a sea of blue swept across the city, Sarah Crook and her son Sammy, like so many others, stood silently on the street to pay their respects to the memory of Constable Andrew Hong.
It's a heavy day. It's a really heavy day.
Everybody, home, march! Over 7,000 officers took part in the standing room only service, a heartbreaking and personal affair for so many, including Hong's daughter Mia, who said they joked how he was the king of useless information, yet she soaked up all he had to give.
Dad, thank you for everything you've taught me. I won't forget it. I promise.
Hong was one of 3 people murdered in a shooting rampage last week that investigators now say began with a targeted attack on a random police officer, Hong. However, they still don't know the motive of the shooter, Sean Petrie, a 40-year-old with an extensive criminal history who later died in a shootout. It was clear from the service that police continued to wrestle with what happened, and that Honger, as he was known at work, was as loved on the job as he was at home. He was devoted to his career, but he lived for his family.
Tomorrow would be our 21st wedding anniversary. So Andrew, if you are listening, please know that you will always and forever be the greatest love of my life. Happy anniversary.
Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
Next, the coupon nanny, who's helping more Canadians cut down the pressures of inflation. After a few weeks of lower late summer prices, the cost to gas up your vehicle is starting to climb back up. As usual, drivers in British Columbia are feeling it first, with the price of a litre of regular climbing by as much as 14 cents overnight to just over $2. Though the price jump won't be quite as extreme, the shift is expected to repeat across the country and to be mirrored in the U.S. over the coming days. Inflation is making it harder than ever for Canadians to pay their bills, so it's no surprise more families are trying to cut costs by cutting out coupons. Now, a Nova Scotia woman who's persevered through her own hardship has emerged as a leader in this new trend. Ross Lord reports on the coupon nanny and her growing following.
For Canadians these days, day-to-day living is less about what they earn than how much they save.
These are great coupons. As you can see, they're for a wide variety of products. 2 of these.
Dana Calder knows all about saving. Since she started couponing for herself and her children, Calder has perfected the art of cutting down on grocery bills.
We only spent $51. We saved $200.71. So literally we saved 4 times of what we spent.
This grandmother of 5 has adopted a nickname, the Coupon Nanny. With punishing inflation making some food products 3 times more expensive, her free advice to others on how to save has never been more timely. Her online following has doubled recently, reaching a wider audience by the day.
But they're starting to realize that by using coupons and cashback options, that's bringing prices down $10, $20, $30, $40 per grocery trip.
Cutting corners on everything from bacon to baby formula.
I started couponing when he was 14 months. That's when I started using a baby formula. And it's like fairly expensive at that time. And I was like searching around looking for ways to get a formula for cheap. And that's where I found her page on Facebook.
Dana knows all about tight finances. She's on a disability pension for post-traumatic stress disorder from her time as a correctional officer.
At any time, any of us could be in that situation. Excuse me, I tend to get emotional.
There are more ways than ever to use coupons, from the traditional method of cutting them out of flyers or collecting from grocery store aisles to printing or mailing them out from online apps. Shoppers can also scan their grocery receipts to a cashback app and get a credit in their debit account.
On my webpage, you can go to one place and put coupon networks, and it'll list all the different places you can find coupons online. And it will say beside it if they're printable, if they're mailable, if you can just load them onto your phone.
Dana says she doesn't play favorites. You don't discriminate, right?
It's fair game. I have no association with any of the stores, anything like that. My job is to help people find the cheapest prices.
Including sharing her know-how in person to clients transitioning out of a nearby homeless shelter.
She's a wealth of knowledge, and everybody that participated was really excited by the apps and the tips and all of the stuff that she presented to them.
If everybody would just help each other a little bit, we'd be able to get through this.
Dana's generosity is coming full circle. A graphic designer giving her website a free makeover so she can start selling ads to recover some costs for a service she's currently providing at her own expense. Ross Lord, Global News, North River, Nova Scotia.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday night. I'm Neetu Garcha. Tonight's Your Canada is Chance Cove, Newfoundland and Labrador. We love seeing your Canada. Please email your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you again tomorrow. Have a great night.